Hello Lima, brought to you by Good Food Restaurants, home of Happy Days, Beer Barrel, and Old City Pride. Also by Fresh and Faded, Jones Clark Funeral Home, and Lima Pallet Company.
Not only were the recent 2019 elections a chance for us to take the country's temperature ahead of what will surely be a knockdown, drag-out clash in 2020, but also the message local residents might send at the ballot box. Lima, supporting a region of growth, has been marketing language, but everyone knows the critical hub of the success of Greater Lima region starts with the city of Lima. In the marquee races of this off-year election cycle in Lima were the all-important city council races. Today, we're fortunate to be joined by two of these former candidates with what could be considered a mandate by winning 64 and 63% respectively in their ward races. We'll hear from Peggy Ahura and Tony Wilkerson, the two newly elected council members. We'll discuss what goals not only for their respective wards, but also the city of Lima as a whole. Welcome, Ms. Ahura, Mr. Wilkerson. It's certainly Council-elect Mr. Wilkerson. I'm going to start with you. In January, when we get a chance to, the month usually is a month of renewed hope, optimism. Everybody has a feeling that, hey, we're really going to do something big. It's a really important for us to start the year off right. I'd like to ask you a question. What emotions are you going to have when you take that oath? I mean, what is your dad? I mean, how are you going to feel, council-elect?
Oh. Boy, that's a great question. I think there's some nervousness because I'm not sure what emotion is going to come out.
Yeah.
As a young person, I was kind of groomed to be a local legislator by my father.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
As you
That's
all know,
why I asked the question.
He's been going for a few years,
but well liked, well respected.
Absolutely, and I know the election night, for example, as I got a phone call and said, "Hey, things are looking pretty good for yourself."
Right.
I try to sneak away from my wife and a friend and try to sneak my moments, but the emotions got the best of me. I thought about him a lot, as well as my mother. They both were very supportive of us as young people. So,
and I say that, council-elect, is because it's important for your elected officials, particularly when we get a chance to have people represent us who know us, who come from where we come from, who feel how we feel. And that's why I asked the question. You're from the area. You and your family have long been what I call people who want to make a difference. Is that what you see yourself doing as you take this oath?
Well, I certainly hope so, and also being that voice for people who are not certainly afraid to speak up, but don't know how to speak up.
Right.
I hope that I can be what I've groomed to be, and what people expect. I think people expect someone to be a stand-up person, to listen to their concerns first, and then act appropriately. And I hope I can do that and do that at my fullest.
And I think and I want you to jump in here, Councilwoman-elect Ahura. I think that's important. If we talk about you, Peg, you certainly, and I appreciate those words, and certainly I want to get back to you, Tony. With all due respect, looking forward to what you bring to the city. Peg, you have a little election background. You're a former board member with the city schools, but certainly a long-time Limalite, if I can say that. You're an executive locally. Your kids were raised here. You were raised here. I think with 64% of the election results coming in that supported you, I think it's safe to say that there was somewhat of a mandate. Wouldn't you say that, Councilwoman-elect, that there seems to be a sense of knowing who you are, Peg, and saying, hey, we'd like that lady to represent our ward and help us get to the fill in the blank?
I think that the biggest issue for most people, regardless of what ward you live in, that I think was definitely a conversation that I heard a lot from the folks in the Fourth Ward, is the housing issue. Mm-hmm. We keep talking about downtown revitalization, but we know how critical the neighborhood revitalization is.
But before you get to that, and you're right, that seemed to be somewhat of the marquee, what I call land in the sand, so to speak. But having said that, though, Peg, as somebody from Lima, I'd want to, and sometimes Hello Lima, Follow Me Tony, likes to get a sense of letting people know who our guests are as opposed to all the figures and the stats that come into play. Peg, you're from Lima. People like you generally in terms of what you represent and what's in your heart. Wouldn't you say that was part of the mandate, if I could backtrack a little?
Of anybody who, Tony and I have had a lot of conversations and solved all the problems of the world over the years.
Right.
But I am passionate about Lima. I fight hard for the city schools. My dad ran for 6th Ward City Council in 1953 when he was 27 years old. And Scott Clark and I had a conversation a couple weeks ago. We think maybe his grandpa beat my dad. But I thought the civic responsibility has been something that I feel like I have been doing my whole life. I was involved in high school. I was involved in college. I came back. I didn't really want it, to be honest with you. All the kids we talk about that we want to come home and work, I was that same kid 35 years ago. I didn't really necessarily want to come home and work. I wanted to go live in the big city with my friends. But I did stay here, and I've been involved from the first moment I came back. I was involved before I left.
Right.
I do care. I care immensely about the reputation of the city.
Thank you.
I've carried a huge chip on my shoulder my entire life, and part of that chip, I think I said at the African American Chamber forum is that that my chip started out as being a South End chip.
Right.
And for kids that grew up in the 6th Ward or went to the city schools and more particularly were growing up in the South End. You had this huge chip on your shoulder because of what people believed that you were.
But all that.
And that translates to the city.
Thank you. And having said that, though, and jump in here when you feel comfortable, Tony, because part of what you and Peg bring to this new, what I call landscape that's going to take effect in the 1st of January is a sense of, and Peg, I want to go back to your word, Councilwoman-elect, passion. You feel like there's a sense of ownership that brought you to where you are today, both from your dad, if I can say that, Council. Yes. And are you telling me that your dad ran for city council?
1953, when he was 27.
But get a load of that, Tony. That's why you guys are sitting here today.
Well, I think same as with Peggy. Our parents love Lima.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to get.
And you have to understand the history of where they came from to get to this point.
Yes.
Lima was hope.
Yes.
It was promised about a good future.
And you say that, Councilman-elect, is that if we want to sit here and talk about stats, and we'll get into some of those, and we'll get into the boring our listeners who have heard you guys' platform through this entire election cycle, but what's important for the viewers, and I want our Lima viewers to know that what's important for our viewers in terms of moving our city forward and keeping our city progressive is for people to have a passion about what they do. Anybody can get elected. The question is can you get elected and stand for what you said, Tony, for what you believe in? Follow me, Peg?
And get something done.
Yes.
And I think probably, and Tony and I had a conversation a couple years ago. Every time you throw around the idea of running, and I at least had some sense of what it meant to run, and Tony, it was completely new for him. But I just feel like the discord in the city, it doesn't get better.
Okay.
And so you feel like, what can you contribute? So part of my, at least professionally, that's what I've been doing is external affairs and working with government, city governments and trustees and stuff my entire career. And I just felt like we've got to stop fighting about just everything because we're not going to get anywhere that way. And especially when I work in economic development for a great deal of my job.
Yep.
And there was a site consultant in Texas in March who said, if you're in a community where your city and county government do not get along, you're dead in the water for economic development because you think you can come in and mask that discord. And most companies are not interested in coming into a place where if the locals can't get along, that's trouble because we can do things locally that they could never do at a state and federal level in terms of getting things done, working together to make something happen. It's so easy to do locally.
And that's true, Tony. It doesn't mean that everybody has to agree.
No.
But you can certainly have what you call civil discourse.
Yes.
Am I right, Councilor?
Well, debate
is
the foundation of all government. That you're able to sit down and you're able to civically or civilly debate whatever the issues are. It doesn't mean you have to like each other. No. Heck, it doesn't mean that you have to live in the same neighborhood. It means that you have the mutual respect to hear each other out and come together for the common good of the people.
And I think, and I don't want to interrupt because you guys are I'm just so excited about the fact that you guys are bringing to the table, or will be in January, the understanding that, hey, we got to move this community forward, and in doing so, we have to do it with an understanding that it's going to be all or nothing in terms of us all coming together. And that's what I wanted the viewers to see, not just in terms of all those numbers that we'll get into, but who you two are as a person. I know I'm somewhat of you know, it's not fair because I've known you guys all my life, it seems like. But having said that, the viewers need to understand that this community is going to be, is in a good place. When we come back, we're going to take a break here, pay some bills. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit of some of the things that may be a little bit controversial. Taxes and what I consider the #1 problem.
From early in the morning when the Happy Days stores open, turn the grills on, get the coffee turned on. Across town, the beer barrels, there's a lot of prep work that has to be done. Sauces being prepped on the stove. At Old City Prime, everything's from scratch. I think the culture in our company is that we care about our people. And in return, our people care about our customers. Thank you so much to all of our team that's worked for us, and thank you so much to all the communities that we're in for being such great customers.
Our barbers and cosmetologists are licensed professionals who specialize in all phases of hair. Whether you are getting a line-up, cut, beard trim, or design, our barbers will help create your unique style. With full-time cosmetologists, also taking appointments and walk-ins from lashes, presses, color, wax to braids, and weaves, Fresh and Faded cosmetologists do it all. Call us for an appointment today. Fresh and Faded Unisex Hair Studio, the largest shop in Northwest Ohio. 419-221-FADE.
If you ain't fresh, you ain't faded.
Welcome back to Hello Lima. We're sitting here with 2 council-elects that will be taking office soon, and I'm going to ask you something that may be a little bit more controversial. I'm going to start with you, Tony, and you jump in here anytime, Peg. Let me read something that you said in an article, Tony, back in October. My focus will be representing every resident of the 2nd Ward. If something is not in the best interest of the 2nd Ward, I'll not support it, nor will I cater to elected officials, business partners, and anyone dwelling outside of the city. I just want to get a position on that, particularly as we talk about somewhat of the boundaries being created. Is your position that you're hoping that 2nd Ward residents will feel the benefit of every decision you're making, or will you communicate some decisions that may not be in the best interest for 2nd Ward, but in the betterment of the whole? How do you balance that? I know I don't want to put you in the spot as hasn't not even taken office yet, but how do you balance that?
Well, I don't know how to balance it. I'll learn as I go along. I certainly hope. But I do know that the issue is bigger than 2nd Ward in some cases.
Yes.
And I have to think about the city as a whole, what's good for the city as a whole. But I can't forget who elected me. And my primary responsibility is to look out for their best interests.
So if I take that, and that's a good point, and I appreciate that feedback. If I take his position, Peg, and jump in here when we talk about if somebody comes along and says, you know, we're going to put a housing development. It may not be in the 2nd Ward, but it may be in the 4th Ward, maybe in the 7th Ward. Could you get behind that? And Peg, do you understand the importance of how housing seems to be somewhat of it's a point of interest?
Mm-hmm. There's no, they're working. I'm not going to say there aren't any plans, because I think that they've been in the infancy of this for the last couple of years, which is where all of these conversations have come out of, you know, the housing study and the discussion with the landlords. There has to be a long-term plan. Mm-hmm. And right now, I mean, it's like, you look at all of our neighborhoods, we were landlocked a very long time ago. The city was landlocked in terms of housing development. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we gave away the school system, you know. I mean, so when you look at areas that, you know, go on one side of the road, Blackburn, for example, you know, if you go down Spring Street and dead into Blackburn right behind the movie theater, one side of the street is the Lima City Schools, and the other side of the street is Shawnee. So for whatever reason, all those things happened years ago. The city grew out, you know, the subdivisions grew out, mm-hmm. but they weren't part of the city school infrastructure. They weren't part, you know, a lot of them are in the township. So it's
And we have your map showing up on the screen, Peg, in terms of what area you represent, but you certainly understand, and I think you both understand, that the city as a whole is going to benefit as the wards grow, absolutely. And as the wards get stronger.
And the wards can't, it's hard to grow wards physically, yes. So you have to do the work within the wards. And so I am the biggest proponent for, you know, we need to start somewhere, and we need to get behind something that's going to either redevelop and do something to make our neighborhoods better.
Let me ask you this question, though, as you talk about the neighborhoods, and I want to ask you about a thing that's been in the news, and I think it's been a big, what I call one of the biggest issues that's facing Lima, and that's the population loss. And if we look at the population loss in Lima as a whole, follow me, Councilman-elect Wilkerson, it seems to be a trend that isn't changing. And I know there isn't a magic wand to address that. And I don't know if housing would address that. You two are as smart as anybody. How do you address the fact that those kids are leaving, Tony? They're not coming back, and people are the migration.
It's a multitude of things. One, the city grew outward, right? And that's where some of the mass left. And then there was also retention, people not coming back. So it's multiple facets. But yes, I think the focus on that would be housing, affordable housing, housing that we have no bank of houses, if you will, that tells a young couple, hey, this is why I want to come back. And that's also well-paying jobs as well.
Yes.
You know, so those things are things that bring people back into a community.
But let me hear this, because I don't have a lot of time here, and you two have a good insight into as long as I call Lima Lights. Peg, one of the things you talk about why the people are migrating out, and we call it white flight, we call it suburban, whatever you want to identify it as, is the stereotype that crime and people in the Lima City, the houses are deteriorating, and some of those are just simply aren't true. It's the perception that people have, and therefore people migrate out of the city. We need Lima to be strong. How do you change the perception of 54% of the city is now rented? Follow me?
70, closer to 70.
Thank you for that. That's why I bring you guys on the show. But when you talk about the poverty rate, particularly in the African American community in Lima, when you talk about some of those, we want you guys to solve all these problems.
Yeah, tomorrow, yesterday. You know, I think that, I was part of that Our Towns group where there was a group of us that got together and talked about different cities throughout the country who had similar issues, Rust Belt cities who came out kind of like, Phoenix, and the things that brought them out. Places like the Met. Everybody had a craft beverage place. So one of the biggest issues is schools, and it's hard to sell a city when you can't sell a school system. So the state, comes out with, back in the day, a few years ago, the grade card system really only hurt the urban districts.
Yes.
Now the grade card is hurting every district, so everybody's more on board to try to help find a fix. When it only affected Lima City, no one was as interested.
Yes.
One of the things that we talked about in our Towns group is you got to get the grade card off of the schools, because no one's going to move into a district that has a district that has a D and an F, even though we all know that school system is performing way different
regardless
than
of how big a houses units you put up, follow me, Peg, regardless of that. So part of that whole egg and the chicken is sort of, Tony, is like, what comes first? What comes first in order to get people to locate into your municipality is to provide those quality of life issues, address those quality of life issues, bring in arts, bring in all those things that young people like, and certainly address what they consider public school systems.
Tony addressed the other piece of it is jobs. Jobs fixes
ails.
Jobs can fix a whole lot of ails. Yes. I mean, it just can, and you got to have good places for people to be able to have access to good jobs.
And let me read one of the questions that somebody mentioned here. One of the questions that I think got from one of the local viewers here that came into place, and it was at your ward. It is from your ward. If I can take this question from your ward, it said, local residents question from your ward, what can be done to increase and encourage higher paying companies to come to Lima, Peggy? That was one of the residents in your ward I reached out to. So it seems to be, and that came from somebody that came from your ward also, how do we bring jobs? It seems like economics is going to be a big part of what's on you guys' plate going into the first of the year.
And you have to have, for me as somebody who was intricately involved with the Pratt Paper Project in Wapakoneta, and did a big project up in Wood County with a glass plant.
Yes.
And so I've been working this for 10 years or so. What Lima really needs is we either need spec buildings or we need a larger industrial park where you have, what Wapakoneta has is a large industrial park that has 200-acre parcels.
So let me ask you guys this question. Tony, would you be willing to support a tax increase in the city of Lima that would support economic infrastructure, which include a bond issue, or could, and you can jump in there too, Peg. Would you guys go out on a limb and say, you know what, and tell me if I'm wrong here, Peggy, because you've been doing it for years, would communities benefit if the city leaders sat down and said, you know what, we're going to float a bond, we're going to put together a large infrastructure tax package that's going to go out and create spec arts center, all these things that, and I'm not asking you guys a position, is that something that's ever...
I don't even know that you would have to do that.
I'm listening.
No. I think you could do that between county and city. There are what things they have available to them now with the Port Authority. I think there are lots of ways. Be more
creative.
The Lima Growth Association, which I'm still part of and we're trying to dissolve, is Shawnee Industrial Park. So that's CHEP, that's ALPLA, that's where the Harley Davidson is. We did that through investment from the utilities along with the Port Authority, 25 years ago.
That didn't cause any additional taxes for the Shawnee Township.
No.
So Tony, you see what Peg's talking about, and I certainly don't want to yak what you guys are talking about here, is that when you bring communities together to try to develop projects, it doesn't take a lot of thought. It just takes a lot of
communication.
Thank you. Rolling up your sleeves and saying, "Is this
this is my commitment? This is what I'll do."
Thank you, Councilor-elect. Follow me. Is this important enough for me to do what needs to be done for the next generation? Is that where you see this going?
Well, I do, and I think that for the last few years we've been stuck because
I'm listening.
Everybody wants to have the title, but not willing to roll up their sleeve and do the work. We've got to get past your title, my title, and just roll our sleeves up and get down and talk about what it's going to take to put things together, to bring private sector in along with public sector for the common good of the community. Branching out on our own is not going to get
It's not going to work.
Yeah, the city can't do it without the county can't do it without the city. That's the whole piece of that puzzle, is that everybody has to agree that this is what we all need to do, and then how are we going to get there, and here's what I can bring to the table, because they all bring something different. I tell the county folks all the time, the city has the water, and that's what you market. And when you talk about selling water, I'm talking, I've heard some of the other folks on council talk about, selling water, like when you expand it out to other communities. I'm talking about selling water to somebody who's, brewing beer. Talking about selling water to somebody who's processing steel and needs a whole lot of water. We need big water users. End users.
End users.
Yes.
What you call them, right, Tony?
Yeah, because that's what we have that nobody else has like we have.
That's your golden chip, so to speak. When we come back, though, we're hearing a lot of good points, though, and that's why I wanted these two on the show. We're hearing a lot of interesting points today. I don't think you get when you have a debate. We're just having what you call a monologue here and talking about different issues. We're going to take a break here and come back.
We at Lima Pallet Company thank you, Lima. In 1977, we started a small family business, and today we continue to grow. Lima Pallet is a full-service pallet and crate provider. Every customer is unique, which is why we build pallets and crates to our customers' specific requirements. Because we have our own fleet of trucks, we're able to provide customers with on-time, same-day, and 24-hour emergency deliveries. Coming together is the beginning, keeping it together is progress, and working together is success. Let's continue to succeed.
The loss of a loved one can leave you with a lot of unanswered questions, feelings of stress and anxiety, and grief that makes events difficult to handle. The experienced funeral directors at Jones Clark Funeral Home will guide you through the aspects of the funeral service with compassion, dignity, and respect. Our staff of dedicated professionals is available to assist you in making funeral service arrangements. The funeral directors at Jones Clark Funeral Home provide individualized funeral services designed to meet the needs of each family. Call us today to pre-plan your funeral.
Welcome back. It's certainly been a lively conversation as we try to solve all the issues with these two new council-elects when they take office. Let me ask you another question here. Particularly, I want to address this with you, Tony. The city of Lima, probably in the next census that comes out, 2020, Peg, I believe it is going to reflect what I consider a large minority population, particularly African American. That population seems to have a sense of being disengaged, left aside, and I don't know what the right word is for it, Tony, and I don't want you to feel like I'm putting you on the spot, but I am. How do you get a community that may represent, Peg, and you jump in here, 36% of the population, maybe somewhere right around 35%. How do you move a city forward when you have a third of the population that is renting, that is feeling
disenfranchised?
Yes, Peg, and the crime and everybody's pointing the fingers. How do you get that part of the population to feel like, as we move this community forward, I don't think you can move a city like Lima forward, Peg, without addressing the large minority population that feels disengaged. Am I wrong?
Well, there's a lot of things that we can point at that's causes.
Okay.
But we have to look at resolution one. It is obviously economics changes a lot of things.
Yeah.
So some employers who are more supportive. I hear talk about not having enough qualified applicants for jobs.
Right.
I'm not certain what that means for each corporation.
Right, Tony.
But I believe wholeheartedly we can change things if we go out and get what we want. In terms that if we cultivate, groom, and put young folks into places where they're going to get these jobs, that changes the mindset. Back here 20 plus years ago, working on a gas leak on Catalpa, and we were out there right before Christmas, and I was proud because it was the first time I've known us to be in historically black neighborhood working double time, if you will, to resolve the problem. Lady sat on the porch, and she called me over. She knew I was one of the Wilkersons,
right?
And she had tears in her eyes.
Is that right?
She had tears in her eyes, and she says, "Hey, who's those other guys?" And she was talking about the African American gentlemen that were working with me.
Is that right?
And she says, "I thought I'd never see that." It says, "You guys are barking out a lot of instructions. Are you guys in charge?" Well, I said, "Well, we're called crew leaders, but we have a supervisor." She says, "No, you're in charge." Now, from her perception,
is that right?
From her perception, that was a total dynamic change that she's not seen in her life. Now, I give the gas company credit for years ago that they went after their talent. And they cultivated their talent.
Yes, they did.
And they made sure that they were in a position to move along the process.
Yes, they did.
We cannot hire people, or people cannot hire people to dispose them like they're, I'm trying to choose my words wisely here without offending, but you just can't discard them like it's like without concern. You have to have a mindful process of cultivating people, and that reflects. And then I'll get more people to the table. When people walk into the city of Lima, they've got to see themselves. When they walk into the hospital, they have to see themselves.
People that reflect that.
Yes,
yeah.
you know, and
police department, fire
yes,
department.
on and down the line. And you're right. If it's 36% and you don't look like 30%, 36%, guess
close
what?
to 30%.
You've got people already feeling like, man, I'm not sure if I feel comfortable here.
That's a good point. And Peggy,
Teachers. I mean, it's everything. Years ago, the city schools went down and recruited minority teachers, from out of state. And those folks have all long retired. And right now, everybody's competing for the same group of professionals. You've got to find creative ways. We've had conversations about, cultivating policemen through school districts, cultivating firefighters through school districts, and the same thing with any other employer is
that is good information.
Finding a way to do it.
I love you guys' talk. There's an old saying in politics, all elections are local. In other words, understand the importance of who you elect at the local level is as important, if not more important, than the national election. The city of Lima is at a crossroads, not because who will be elected president of the United States in 2020 or what's going to happen to the nation's debt or even climate change. Yes, those issues are vital to the country, but residents of Lima need to understand that what will have the biggest impact on where we live, work, and play is what direction will the city leaders take Lima, and how can residents in Lima work to support and assist in this direction of growth, increase economic opportunities, and improve quality of life. Although the position in the past of those residents living outside of the city limit was, they should mind their own business. As a non-city resident, I would remind you that when asked the city you live in, Shawnee, Ohio does not exist no more than other cities in our local cities. We should all work for and expect the best for Lima, whether we live in this city or right outside the city limits. As a local graduate of Lima City Elementary and middle schools, opening my first office in downtown Lima in 1992 and currently investing in a downtown renovation project, I'm happy to call Lima, Ohio my home. From the discussion today with two of Lima's newly elected officials that I've had the pleasure of knowing for decades, I'm excited to hear their vision and hope for Lima, understanding that Lima's future looks bright as ever. Please visit our social media platforms and follow us on Facebook live stream the show. Hello, Lima.
Hello Lima, brought to you by Good Food Restaurants, home of Happy Days, Beer Barrel, and Old City Pride. Also by Fresh and Faded, Jones Clark Funeral Home, and Lima Pallet Company.